All right, welcome back. Last time we were talking about OpenAPI and Swagger annotations and adding them to our REST endpoints. I've gone through and updated all our REST endpoints to include a bunch of documentation. I'll go ahead and start the server. And I'll refresh this page. So this is what it looks like after we're done. We've got two tags over here. So we've got one for to-do lists, which has our 5 to-do list endpoints. Then we've got one for the to-do items within those lists, and we've got our 5 endpoints there. If I just scroll down, these will expand automatically. We've got some code snippets in here. We've got some JSON snippets. We've got some example responses. We've got API added in our drop down here, so the paths are correct. We've got example JSON data over here that's collapsible. We've got error response examples as well. We've got our 2 response schemas down here, so we can see that it returns an array in this case. And each object in the array will have these 2 fields in it. And then our server error response will look like this. And then if you keep scrolling down, it will scroll to the next item in the list and so forth. So in the add case, we do get a payload section that shows what an example payload would look like in the request body. So all this is looking pretty good. And I'll describe some of the changes that were made to make that happen. So obviously added a significant amount of markdown in here, or text in here, which happens to be markdown formatted to expand this description. It includes bullets, which I didn't actually show, but if I come over here to delete, we get some markdown bullets in there. We get code fragments, which we can see in here. We see the JSON, we see the bash curl command. So we get some good output. Same with our example values. We can put markdown in here also. So everything's looking pretty good. I moved the parameter annotations down into the method on the actual parameters themselves, which allows those to show up right in here without duplicates like we had earlier. So that part's looking good. I updated the to-do item and the to-do list with to include annotations as well. So now we get a description and we get examples here, as well as I added the minimum here, and I added some schema information on the fields themselves to describe what the fields look like. So that information makes it down into here as well. So yeah, that part's looking good. I also updated error response in the same way. So it's basically a model object that gets returned as well. It's not currently in the model package since we're only using it as part of our responses. So that part's looking good. The security filter was modified to allow access to OpenAPI without providing headers. I did add this application path. This is only used as part of the documentation generation to make sure that this path is correct. Make sure it has this /API on there to match what we have in our server configuration. So that part's looking good. And I did update the tests as well. In a couple of these, like in the post and put, I did add a little bit of additional validation. So before I create an item, I do verify that the list exists, and I return a different error message if it doesn't exist. So I did update the tests to indicate that as well, including the situation where the list isn't found, and I added mocks to make sure that a list is returned in all the other cases. So other than that, everything's looking good. Everything builds cleanly. So I'll say updated REST endpoints with Swagger annotations. All right, so definitely check out the source code to see what all those annotations look like. They're mostly self-explanatory, but yeah, check those out if you're interested in more details. So the next thing I want to do is update our security a little bit. So right now, our security filter checks to make sure a proxy secret header is provided, but we're not actually validating that header at all, or what that value looks like. So when Rapid API makes requests, it will send us a specific header or a specific proxy secret value in the proxy secret header. And so we'll, in order to verify that, we need to add configuration that tells us what the Rapid API proxy secret actually is, and then we'll compare every single request that comes in to make sure that that secret is correct. So let's go up to our configuration. We will need a new configuration in here for, say, proxy secret, or maybe a Rapid proxy secret. For testing, we'll just call it secret. In our prod, once we're actually connected to Rapid API, we'll pull this down from their web page. For now, I'll just leave it as secret, and then, or actually, I'll change it to do, and we'll update that once we're integrated into Rapid API. So let's come in here into our config. Where are our config keys? Here they are. So config keys, let's add a Rapid API proxy secret config. And we need to load that into our security filter. So right now our security filter has no configuration coming into it at all. So we need to update that. Private final config, type safe config. Let's add a constructor parameter. This looks good. Now, let's click on and see where these problems are. I assume in our tests. Yeah, so we've got a couple of tests that were updated to include a config that we haven't actually provided yet. So let's come up here. Actually, we'll just create a mock for that. Well, no, we'll create an actual config from our config factory. And I guess we'll do from properties like we did last time. I'll parse properties. All right, so we'll do that. And we'll do that. So that makes our tests at least compile. We'll verify that they work later on. All right, so now we have our config inside our security filter. Down here, we can verify that our expected proxy secret matches the proxy secret that we actually received. So let's do one of these. So if they're not equal, then we're going to throw a not authorized exception. We'll say invalid proxy secret. We don't need to provide the value. We don't need the header. We will include, or we'll set the status to unauthorized. So that looks like it makes sense. Now that we've updated our security header, let's update our security filter test. So in this case, we are passing in a secret as our configuration, but we're getting a proxy secret. Let's change this so that they are both the same, so that one will pass. And then let's do the same thing. Let's call this test filter successful. We could call this one test filter invalid proxy secret. So let's call this invalid, and that way invalid will get passed in as the header, and it shouldn't match here. So after we do this this filter, we should get let's come up here and see what we're doing up here. So we should do, yeah, let's do this. So we don't want to just call this directly because it's going to throw an exception. So we want to capture what that exception is and catch it, and then we can verify. Well, if we don't want to verify that we can verify that it wasn't called, because our security context shouldn't get updated since we had an exception. We can use any here. I'll go ahead and static import that. All right, and then we can verify. It's actually assertions.assert equals that our message here should be, I think I said invalid proxy secret. All right, let's run all these tests. Verify that our security filter is doing what we want it to. Okay, so everything's looking good. We got the exception that we expected when the values were different, and so that seems to be working just fine. What that allows us to do is, actually verify the information that we get from Rapid API to make sure that requests that come into our server do actually come from Rapid API. Now we may want the case where some customer contacts us directly and wants access to the API. In that situation, we should add support so that we can give them a new header that they can pass in, excuse me, and give them an API key that they can use as the value for that header, and then basically bypass our security filter by providing that header information. So let's go ahead and implement that. We have security header here. Let's go look and see what security headers we currently support. They're all Rapid API security headers. So let's go ahead and add our own. We can call it tutorial API key. And we'll keep the X at the beginning. That's standard notation that this is a custom header. So we can say key or secret. I guess we'll use key. So now, let's close this stuff. Let's stop our server. So up here in our security filter, what we need is when we see this header, we need to map it to a particular user and a particular subscription, so we can manage that information either in our database and reach into our database whenever we see this key and find the relevant user, or we can track that information via configuration files. So I guess we'll go ahead and use our database. So we'll need to update our service factory and basically create new flyway schema script, or update this one. We haven't actually deployed anywhere, so we could go ahead and update our initial database schema and include it. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's create a new table. We'll call it API keys. So we'll use we'll keep track of what the key is. Key is actually a keyword within SQL, so we can see the word key here as well. So let's not call it key. Let's call it API key. And then we'll want a user ID, and we'll want a subscription. So yeah, we'll create a primary key here that will be the API key. We'll create some indexes. We'll want a user. We really only need an API key. That's what we're going to be doing lookups on. All right, so there's our table. We need implementation here on a service. So let's copy one of these. So we have an API key service through an optional. We actually need a model object to represent our API key. I guess we'll put it in this user package. And so that'll give us all three. Let's create getters and setters. Equals and hash codes, or hash code, and also toString. And let's shrink this line down, or break this line up a little bit. All right, so there's our API key object. Let's update this. We only need one method. I guess we'll keep a truncate as well, just for testing. So this method will do a lookup for the key, and then if it exists, then we'll return the API key object. So let's create an implementation here. All right, so this is going to be an API key service. We need to return an API key. All right, there's our SQL. We only need to set one of these. result set will be an if, optional of, new API key. We will set the API key to that. We'll set the user to the user column, if I remember, or did I call it user ID? User ID. And we'll set the subscription to subscription.from. Like, okay, this actually returns an optional. So let's pull this up here. And then let's verify. So this really shouldn't happen because that means an invalid subscription was typed in. So in this case, we could throw an actual, like a runtime exception saying that it's invalid. But instead, let's just act like it doesn't exist and return an optional.empty. And then here we can say subscription.get because we've already verified that it's present. So let's actually replace this with is empty. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, we don't need any of these other methods except truncate. Let's update this exception as well. All right, this looks pretty good. Let's close these. Let's update our service factory interface. Let's also update our default service factory. All right, there's our getter. The last thing we need to do is update our tests. So let's create a copy here. All right, we don't care about to-do list. Let's replace that with API key. Pretty much throughout. That's the wrong model. Package. So we'll use API key, or what is it? It's API key with a lowercase key. I don't really like that. I guess it makes sense though. Yeah, we'll leave it as is for now. All right, so we don't need a bunch of API keys. We don't need principals. We don't need this to-do list service. Yeah, so let's get rid of that stuff. Let's get rid of this. We don't need this before each. So let's test the get with no keys. So we'll do that. Let's see, fetched. All right, we'll do that update. So we'll call that, well, we can call it ID. So fetched is empty. We don't need the wrong principal. We don't need a wrong ID. Let's do a get found. user subscription. Okay, so we currently don't actually have a way to do an insert into the database to verify that one exists. So we can do that either manually using our data source here, which I guess makes sense because we don't need our service to actually do it. Well, I guess maybe we should. Potentially we should add a REST endpoint used by like an admin to insert into the database. Yeah, maybe we should go ahead and create an endpoint for that. We're coming up on 25 minutes. I'll continue doing some of this offline and we'll pick back up afterwards. Pretty much all we have left is tests and adding a new implementation to do an insert. It's going to be very similar to these other inserts that we've already done. Like this create. So I'll do something similar and fill you in when we come back. All right, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next one.